Alright, this is Peter Parker, Spider-Man 28. I was actually going to review the second part of the Unterman's daughter story, but then I realised that this one was more appropriate. Yesterday I reviewed an awful comic called Son of M, where Spider-Man was written terribly. Among other things, there was a bit where a sad character said, "I want to kill myself," and then a frumpy Spider-Man went, "Well, maybe you should." Spider-Man, he pushed a man to fucking suicide. And here is an issue about how Spider-Man won't even assist in suicide when it is a mercy. I have just given away the ending, but this story is a really great look at Spider-Man and his unshakable moral compass. Spider-Man, he has been summoned to the hideout of one of his hard enemies, one of the more obscure sort of ones. It is Mental Storm. Mental Storm, or just Mental if you are his friend. Mental was a baddie, and he used to work under Norman Osborn. He was like a robotics expert. He used to make big robot things that Spider-Man fought against. And then in the 90s, he became like a cyborg because it was the 90s. And now, as you can see, he is just a head with a bunch of wires gunning in, but he has still got his human mind and his human personality. But this is like his life now. We get the backstory explaining how he wound up this way and how he is just a head being kept alive by machines. And he has brought Spider-Man here because he wants putting out of his misery. He wants Spider-Man to pull the plug so that he can die and not be tortured in pain anymore. This is the sort of loaded topic that comic books can botch and bungle quite a lot. Suicide and assisted suicide. It is a topic that many writers fail to tackle well or with much real thought. But I think this issue does a good job of it and presenting Spider-Man with a moral debate that he settles in a manner consistent with his firmly established character. But I can also see some people not enjoying this issue because of Spider-Man's ultimate decision. Our here though, it's like a bloody episode of Desmond's from the 90s. Barbershop sort of thing. Yeah. Our main focus is on Spider-Man and this ethical question. Straight up, Spider-Man, he doesn't kill. We all know that. And despite what that shite comic yesterday says, Spider-Man, he would never let a suicidal person go. He would try and talk them down and convince them that life is worth living. Spider-Man, despite his own experience, he is an optimist and a hopeful figure. And we have that here. He starts off by saying how he doesn't kill. There is no way I can do it, Mental. That is not who I am. But Mental, he quickly rebukes that by saying that it isn't killing, it is a mercy. Even when Mental presents a scenario that's shutting him down, it'll stop the machine that is consuming him from killing thousands via the sort of blackouts and electrical fires that we saw caused last issue. Spider-Man, he is pretty unwavering in his stance. Then we have got a weird cut. That scene is over now, and Spider-Man has gone home, and he is stuck pondering on his dilemma. Naturally, he asks his Auntie May for her take on the philosophy of euthanasia. And surprisingly, the writer, Richard Jenkins, he doesn't use this as an excuse for them to remember how bloody brilliant Uncle Ben was. And instead, we get stuff of that ilk with Auntie May remembering how her uncle was stricken with cancer and he was dying and he was in a lot of pain, and then her father helped him commit suicide. Very convenient that Auntie May had an incredibly relevant story from her past to share that had never been mentioned before or since. I suspect she might be a pathological liar. While this is all extremely weighty stuff, I mostly laughed at this scene because it is presented as Peter Parker asking his Auntie May about if it is okay for him to turn off her life support if she is really ill and dying in a hospital. So then Spider-Man, he goes to the computer lab and his hacker friend is there. He has got a goatee. I'm pretty sure this hacker friend, he only ever appears in this one story. Spider-Man, he goes onto a chat room and he starts talking to Mental Storm. And if you look, neither of them use any emojis. Let's hope that it's not some vigilante group or some hunters pretending to be Mental Storm in a chat room to bait and entrap Spider-Man into a compromising situation. Just like what happened with Craig Gilbert from my school outside of Stanley Asda last year. He was intending to have sex with a 14-year-old girl, so he is in jail now. His name came after mine on the school register. It's safe to say his name will not be coming after mine on his current register. So Spider-Man, he has his hacker friend create a computer virus on a floppy disk. Hey, floppy disks, remember them? What are they all about? They're not that floppy, and they sure don't look like no discs to me. This is meant to shut down Mental Storm. Just try to ignore all this dated computer jargon, and this here is a good story. So Spider-Man, he goes back to Mental's hideout, and all the machinery and stuff, it is attacking him because it knows that he is coming to kill Mental. And this whole action scene here, it's probably just here as an editorial requirement to say that there was some action in the comic rather than it being a pretty low-key story about assisted suicide. So Spider-Man, he pops in the floppy disk. Hey, remember floppy disks? Oh, what's the deal with floppy disks? They didn't have very good capacity. You could hardly fit anything on them. Am I right? And we find out that Spider-Man, he actually couldn't go through with it. Instead, he had his hacker friend create something that would like freeze things. It would like put Mental and the computer into sleep mode. And Spider-Man is going to strive to find some way to resolve and help Mental without resorting to pulling the plug. I could not do it, Mental. I mean, I beat myself up over this like you would not believe it. I must have thought about 1,000 different ways, but it is just not for me. And then Mental, he shows up 4 years later in a Tom Beevort edited comic, without any mention of this. Tom B vote, making sure that good stories from his time at Marvel are still tarnished in some way. I like this as a Spider-Man story that pushes the character into a situation he doesn't really want to be in, and it appropriately and correctly resolves it, with Spider-Man never faltering as a character. I do think some people they think that he should have just pulled the plug, but I think that Spider-Man, well, he's like this. This is Spider-Man. This is the character. He would fret and think on it for days, but when it comes down to it, he would never be able to pull the trigger in the end. So since this comic gets Spider-Man's character right, I am giving it a 7 thumbs up.